Althea. Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to have all of you here for a really important conversation that we've been looking forward to for quite some time. We all need to do a better job at outreach and listening and engaging people who have not typically been engaged in our age-friendly work and reaching those more marginalized populations that we're missing around the table. Thank you. This group is very diverse today in geography and in other ways, I'm sure. And we appreciate you joining us from wherever you are. I think this is a testament to the importance of this topic. And we're so glad to have our colleagues presenting for us today that we haven't seen in a while. Hi, Laurent. How are you? Good to see you again. And we're very appreciative of the work they've put into organizing a session for us today. So thank you very much for joining us, and let's get underway.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Julia. I also wanted to make sure that we acknowledge our funders that make Age-Friendly North Jersey possible, which is Julia's group from the Henry and Marilyn Todd Foundation and Rini Carneal's group from the Grata Fund for Senior Care. So thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our esteemed presenters. We have Dr. Melanie Plasencia, who is a postdoctoral fellow at Dartmouth College. Her research is committed to improving older immigrants' social, economic, and health conditions by learning about the role social support and place have in shaping their health and well-being. She has a PhD and MA in ethnic studies from the University of California, Berkeley. And some of you may remember our next presenter, who is also now a doctor, Laurent Reyes, who had been doing a lot of work with Age-Friendly at the earlier days, kind of before I came along too. Dr. Reyes is an incoming faculty member at University of California, Berkeley. I hope I got all of this correct. And she researches civic participation, Latinx and Black older adults, immigration, systemic inequality, intersectional life course theory, participatory research, and art-based research. She has a PhD in social work and an MSW from Rutgers University. Both of our presenters today have received many awards and distinctions, and we encourage you to view their work online. And with that, I would like to invite Melanie to go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Sounds good. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm sharing sound. Okay. Okay. So, as you all heard, my name is Melanie Plasencia, and I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at Dartmouth College. And let's see if I can move that, where I'll be working on my first book manuscript. And the book manuscript will be based on my dissertation research, which is on a community of poor older adults, older Latinx adults, and the role of social networks and community and place in their decisions to age in place, age in community. And today I will be presenting on some of the more practical findings of my dissertation, including my research on this community, which is located in Union City, New Jersey, and also kind of making an argument that in many ways it is a naturally occurring age-friendly destination for older Latino immigrants. As we all know, our aging population continues to become more diverse. In particular, the Latino senior population is set to increase to 94.7 million by 2060. Given our diverse aging population, it's of great importance to study aging in place in age-friendly communities, since the majority of older adults, especially ethnic older adults, wish to age in community rather than age-separated institutions. But even more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic made us aware of the growing need for age-friendly communities throughout the country. For example, inequities in long-term care facilities throughout the United States and in New Jersey experienced heightened rates of infection among BIPOC older adults. The consequences of such inequities will have lasting implications for whether BIPOC older adults will choose to even want to grow old in institutional settings. Furthermore, many older adults growing old in communities that are not age-friendly found themselves isolated during the pandemic, which negatively impacted their health and well-being. Which is, why as researchers, politicians, and advocates, we need to continue to explore and innovate emerging programs and practices that support older adults so that they can age in place with the necessary resources and support needed into the foreseeable future. For the purview of this presentation, age-friendly communities, as we all know, is, a place that involves and values and supports older adults with infrastructure and services that effectively accommodate their changing needs. The research that I will share with you today examines how older Latinos in under-resourced areas in an ethnic enclave utilize natural elements in their community to cultivate a quote-unquote age-friendly environment. For my research, I conducted 72 semi-structured interviews in either Spanish or English with older adults, 65 years and older, of Latin American descent. I also conducted participant observation for 2 years among older Latinos in the community, which really helped me to discover older Latino geography. Moreover, by being community with these older Latinos, doing these participant observations in many of the places that were very integral for them in their daily lives, I got to see a lot of informal interactions among older people, and it became key to understanding kind of how they conceptualize their community, but also conceptualize an age-friendly one. Participants were all from, obviously from Union City, New Jersey. And if you're not familiar with it, which I imagine many of you are, since most of us are from New Jersey, it's very close to New York, right across, from Times Square, essentially, the Hudson River. And that this community is largely an immigrant community. A lot of the older adults in that community migrated from the 60s to the 80s to work in the embroidery factories, both in New York City and in Union City. And Union City at that time was called the embroidery capital of the world, I think, at that point. And so a lot of them worked there, and then NAFTA happened. A lot of those factories moved away to Latin America and Asia and left many of them without pensions or adequate retirement. But they all eventually many of them decided to grow old in this community, which is kind of the subject of my larger dissertation. So just with that background, even though the topic that I'm sharing today is about how it's age friendly, I also want to say that this community is also a poor immigrant community undergoing extreme gentrification, but yet despite the gentrification, a lot of older Latinos want to remain in this community. And I think that's really important to recognize and support. Some of the findings from the study that I will share with you today emerged after asking older Latinos what they liked about their community, but also what they would like to change. And these questions were part of the larger research protocol that I had. And I took kind of a life course approach, and then I asked them questions about their migration to the United States, their eventual settlement to Union City, and then how they are presently aging in community. And a part of my work was, rather than assume that they are stuck in place, which is a gerontological term that describes how poor older adults may not have a choice to move beyond the communities for better resources, I choose to give agency to my participants and ask them why they decide to stay in place. And I think it's important that if we want to know what an age-friendly community is, that we ask them why they want to stay, why they're staying there presently, and not just assume that they're there because they're stuck. I think it's much more complicated than that. And so by asking them why they stay in place and in the community, I feel like it allowed me to unravel some of the nuances that might make this community desirable for older Latinx folks. I developed this concept, Tranquilo Ambiente, or TA, much like the use of success essay for successful aging. That's kind of where I was going with it. So it seems like there's like a lot of little two acronym theoretical terms, and I was trying to implement that. AT didn't sound right, so I did TA. A majority of participants discussed, so a majority of them discussed Union City as a tranquilo environment, an ambiente tranquilo or tranquil, all that kind of, the translation is a tranquil environment. That's what they were looking for. That's what they liked about the community. And when participants when they use these combination of words, I often ask them for more clarification about its significance in order to understand what this concept meant to them. And so you would think that a tranquil environment means like literally that they want like a very peaceful and quiet place to live. And that's why they like Union City. But Union City is not a quiet or I would even characterize as very peaceful. There's a lot of, noise. It's a city, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of people walking. And so I continue to ask them, like, what do you mean by this? Because what they find to be tranquil, right, or a tranquilo, a TA or ambiente tranquilo is really complicated and nuanced. And there's a lot there to unpack about what this really means, right? And it seemed that over time it became easy to identify much of the characteristics they described as part of what many scholars have come to know as characteristics of an age-friendly community. For example, older Latinos found the community a good place for seniors to grow old due to, one, a sense of perceived personal safety. So even though Union City has likely rates of crime and violence typical of any medium-sized urban center, older Latinos describe their community as tranquilo or tranquil based on a series of physical and community attributes that made them feel safe and protected. For example, and this is where the merging of what the age-friendly characteristics are. They thought of parts of this, TA was having lighted streets, newly paved streets, cameras in public areas. This for them provided a sense that there was, attention, to the physical environment, but it was also about cultural establishments. So in their perceptions of safety, it was also about their relationships with other people in the community, and that they felt that they can call on them when they were needed, or that people remembered them in the community. So if anything were to happen to them, or if they had gone missing, there would be someone that would be there to support them. Second, older adults or older Latinos found the community a good place for seniors to grow old due to its ethnic and social cultural connectedness. They felt connected to other residents due to the time they had spent in the community. So again, a lot of these older adults have been in their community for, a few decades. And these connections with others allow them to kind of navigate the environment more easily and also not feel the added weight or stigma of their immigration status, lack of English, mobility, and the like. In fact, many participants shared that they would lose a critical part of their purpose, livelihood, and even their health if they were to leave the community and lose their ethnic and social cultural connectedness. So there's obviously something here to say about the social determinants of health and how this place is kind of really influencing both, because of it's influencing them based on their relationships, but also the place itself. So lastly, similar to other age-friendly studies, spatial and cultural accessibility was an important component for older Latinos because it allowed them to access community living spaces. So for example, older Latinos spoke about the need to have quick access to critical infrastructure such as transportation, right? Spanish-speaking pharmacies and medical centers and offices. However, their perceptions were not limited to health infrastructure, as it also included street corner stores or bodegas. So bodegas were like really critical in a lot of these interviews. The fact that they had immediate access to basic necessities and cultural products, like they can go to the bodega and find something that they needed for a recipe, like a lot of Hispanic Caribbeans eat plátanos, and the bodega has plantains, all the time. So there was that like sense of home and comfort that was immediately available for them. And I think that in all these three kind of findings point to the importance of considering the physical, right? When we discuss like the streets and the lights and, and the pavement, right? That it's easy to walk, that you won't trip, but also the social aspects. So the relationships and then the cultural aspects. So having the bodega there, having the access to these kind of cultural elements that bring comfort. And so I think all of those social, cultural, and physical, as we all know from the literature, is extremely important, as it is also with historically marginalized older adults. So But what does this mean on a practical level? How can we implement notions of this in other communities? For starters, obviously a holistic approach is needed for the creation and implementation of age-friendly communities that takes into account the physical and social aspects of the community, but also the intersectional realities of the community members themselves. So it means embracing what older adults, it also means embracing what older adults tell us is important to them and involving them in the research process, as many of us have been doing in our work on age-friendly communities. It also means holding on to the uniqueness that may exist across communities in each state, county, or city. And it means attempting to elevate the already positive attributes that might exist in our spaces already to support older adults. So that's kind of like the theoretical side, or when we're thinking about developing. But more on the practical side of implementation, these are some of the more practical reasons why older Latinos really appreciated Union City and SAR as senior friendly, quote unquote. So for starters, older adults have an active office in City Hall where they can go to for help, and I know this exists in many places. The office in this regard is run intergenerationally. So that is the majority of the workers are college students who support older adults as if they were their own abuelos and abuelas. So that's an added dimension that I think is really interesting. The office also provides a range of support, such as translation of documents, referrals for furniture, information about food pantries, energy assistance program information, as well as one-on-one support for Medicaid and other federal programs. So it does a lot of stuff. But there's also a vibrant set of events that take place on a monthly basis that cater to the older Latinx population in the community. And so I have a video. If I have time, I'll show it to you, just so you can see one of the events. It's only a minute long, so I'll see if I have some time for that. And essentially, these events bring over 300 older Latinx, but older adults in the community together in celebration of an important American or Latinx holiday. They also give older adults an opportunity to connect with others, not just as older people. So they're not being relegated to a space where it's like you all are older people, but they're enjoying themselves and having fun, having a good time just with one another as just people. And so in addition to these events, the city hosts trips and activities for seniors, such as taking them to Amish country. They've taken them to Atlantic City casinos, to the malls, to supermarkets in the area. Sometimes seniors would take these trips just to get out of the house. So a lot of seniors would share that they would take the bus to go to the supermarket and just buy a plantain or buy a yogurt. For them, it was more of the activity, the kind of social engagement of going to City Hall, taking the bus and going to the supermarket than actually, going food shopping. So I think that's something to really think about, is that sometimes just the motivation or the act of going out is really important and is just enough for older adults in the community and what they need. And so they were. So then, moreover, the events also kind of made them feel like valuable members, since they were catered to, right? These programs were specifically made for them. Going to Amish country, going to Atlantic City, having access to a lot of these services, having their own office, right? People to attend to them were all kind of made them feel like valuable members, there. And one of the most critical parts of the City Hall Senior Center is also that they provide transportation to seniors. They request that seniors give them at least a 3-day notice of any appointment that they need. And one of the reasons why the seniors in Union City felt like their senior center was better than other ones or like other areas was that their transportation doesn't have a mileage kind of cap. If they need to go to a medical appointment like 35, 40 minutes away, the City Hall will take them. And so in addition to the transportation, a lot of other neighboring areas don't have the kinds of events that they have for the Latinos. In Union City, they have like Dominican Mother's Day event and, Cuban Independence. So there's a lot of cultural events too that make it very special compared to neighboring places. So in all the community they had built, the Spanish language, all of this, the cultural events, the transportation, all made older adults feel like their health and well-being were being paid attention to. And then just kind of in closing, I don't know if I have time for that, but in closing, I would just like to end with sharing that the community, obviously is going through significant change, and just make a note that I think in the future, or even, now, we should make sure that these age-friendly initiatives, especially in these cities that are vulnerable to these evolving changes of gentrification, that's part of our acknowledgement when we're working in these communities, and we really do need to think about like how to support older adults that really want to stay in these communities, even though they're being pushed out, right, with long-term affordable housing and other resources. And yeah, I'm happy to discuss more of my findings, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Melanie. And I hope you can put your contact information and also the link to the video in the chat too, so people can view that at their own leisure. Thank you very much for sharing all of the different kind of strengths and needs that are sometimes similar, sometimes different from what we've learned about some other general work on age friendly. Thank you. We're going to take questions and have our discussions after both presenters have gone, just in case anybody, but please note down any questions that you have, because we will have ample time for discussion later. Great. And Loudon, you're up. And you're muted still.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see it? Everything looks good?
Yep, looks good to me.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Laurent Reyes, a recent PhD who graduated from Rutgers School of Social Work and soon to be faculty at UC Berkeley School of Social Welfare. So for this presentation, I'm going to be drawing from my work on age-friendly communities and Black and Latinx civic participation. The first paper, characterizing older adults' engagement in age-friendly community initiatives, emerged from my work with Dr. Emily Greenfield. We conducted in-depth interviews with many of you, actually the leadership teams from 8 initiatives across 11 municipalities in northern New Jersey. And the leadership teams that we interviewed included a project coordinator, a director, and in most cases, supervisors and project assistants as well. This paper focused on understanding how AFCIs were engaging older adults in their communities. The second paper, experiences of civic participation among older African American and Latinx immigrant adults in the context of an ageist and racist society, emerged from my dissertation work where I interviewed 17 older Latinx immigrants and African American adults aged 60 and older. 12 participants lived in central and northern New Jersey. And this paper focused on understanding how ageism and racism influence civic participation, which I broadly define as contributions to the community. So just a quick overview of what we know about AFCI older adult engagement from the literature is that AFCIs, it's the engagement of older adults is one of the key fundamental aspects of AFCIs. And they're supposed to be involved in the development and implementation of the initiative in their communities. And as AFCI scholars, Menek and colleagues state, presumably older adults must be involved in identifying areas of need, prioritizing key issues, and ensuring appropriate implementation. Engagement of older adults would therefore be essential. However, literature on AFCIs nationally and internationally shows that AFCIs struggle to engage older adults in the process of developing and sustaining AFCIs. Furthermore, the literature also shows that engagement of ethnic minorities and other historically marginalized older adults has proven difficult. So in our paper, we identified 5 distinct categories of how the leadership team engages older adults in the initiative in northern New Jersey. We found that the most common ways older adults were engaged were as consumers, informants, and volunteers. As consumers, older adults didn't so much participate, but they benefited from receiving information, goods, and services through the AFCI and its partnerships. As informants, older adults were asked to give their opinions and provide feedback, and a few were asked to be members of advisory councils and committees. And finally, as volunteers, they were asked to be in to participate in specific opportunities that were usually time limited. And so it was carrying out an event or a project that was managed and led by an AFCI administrator. What all these three categories have in common is that they do not provide older adults an opportunity to influence AFCI decisions directly. As informants, they may provide feedback, but that does not guarantee that their ideas and suggestions will be implemented. And as volunteers, they are asked to participate in carrying out a project, but it is through specific directions from AFCI administrators, not through their own agency and decision making. Really, it is the champions and administrators of AFCIs who develop and decide the focus, strategy, and direction of the initiative. Yet results show that this is where older adults from the community were engaged the least. And while we did not capture race and ethnicity of older adults' participation in each of these categories, we know from empirical literature that Black and Latinx older adults are least likely to be in leadership positions of AFCIs. And in general, we see a national trend from foundations, nonprofit organizations, and community initiatives such as AFCIs, mostly focusing on engaging older and Latinx Black older adults as volunteers. However, based on results from my research with Black and Latinx older adults in New York and New Jersey, I believe it is by engaging them as leaders that could prove to be the most fruitful for advancing AFCI's values of equity and garnering greater community support from diverse groups. I say that because the older adults I spoke to defined themselves as rebels, leaders, mentors, fighters, activists, organizers, healers, and solutions persons. One African-American participant specifically said, "I've always been very clear about how I spend my time and where I think I can have an impact. That's why I'm not really a joiner." It was clear that older adults in this sample knew their place in their community. They were well connected, knew where they could have meaningful impact, and were also aware of places that would jeopardize or create barriers for authentic participation. We know that implicit and explicit discrimination based on race, language, citizenship, health, and age have consistently silenced and marginalized the contributions of Latinx and Black communities. However, much of the literature on participation of ethnic minority older adults explains low levels of participation among these groups through individual level barriers, such as being disabled, non-English speaking, and living in poverty. However, I examined Black and Latinx immigrant adult participation through their lens, considering structural and systemic barriers, such as ageism and racism. Based on this research, I find that their participation is influenced by their sense of social belonging, such as where they feel they can make an impact, avoiding spaces where they perceive they will be rejected or marginalized due to their ethnic identity. And finally, ageist misconception deems older adults who have poor health or are homebound as inactive. Yet results from this study show that participation does shift according to physical capacity, but does not necessarily stop. So in this first theme, we explore belonging to an oppressed group. Participants discuss their choice of where to allocate their time and resources. For many participants, this decision was highly influenced by their sense of belonging to a group that is economically, socially, and politically oppressed. This, coupled with shared ethno-racial identity, language, and culture, contributed to participants feeling that it was in their own communities where they were welcomed and needed. For example, here present two participants, both of which helped to create and sustain informal community groups that raise money to help community members in need, among other activities. And in these quotes, they discuss how their ethnic identity is reflected in their participation with their communities. I will read the one highlighted in the interest of time. So with Hispanics, I feel more comfortable because I am Hispanic and because I speak Spanish. I have the greatest ease of communicating and I know the needs and everything too. Also because of culture, it changes everything. These quotes tell us that some Latinx and Black older adults have strong sense of belonging to their ethnic and cultural groups. They know what is happening in their communities and how to step up to help. They take leadership by leveraging their language, culture, life experience, community connections, and skills. In this second theme, safety considerations, we can continue to observe how their ethnic and racial identity informs participation. In this case, it was a consideration for deciding where they could safely and authentically participate. Given the history of racism in this country, it was not surprising to find that Black and Latinx older adults in the sample expressed caution participating with majority white groups. For example, one African American participant discussed the situation where she had recently been asked to join the board of a local fundraising group. And she said, the director of a community organization called to ask if I would join the board of a community group. They're all white. I know the board members, but I don't want to join them because I wouldn't feel comfortable being part of that board. I might vote for all the Black or Hispanic organizations that apply for money. Given her concerns for the lack of ethno-racial representation, she rejected the position. Ultimately, joining the board would have placed her in a vulnerable position where she would be tokenized and or alone in advocating for the needs of the Black and Latinx community. Similarly, a Latinx older adult participant said that due to language barriers and racism, they avoided participating with American organizations. Through these experiences, we can see the importance of having leadership group that is ethnically and linguistically diverse for engaging older adults from historically oppressed groups. In this third theme, physical vulnerability, participants discussed feeling that they no longer were contributing to their communities due to health issues or disability. However, after listening to their stories, it was clear they still held an important role in the community that went unrecognized because of ageist ideals that claim that active and healthy aging is being out in the community and not being homebound. Interestingly so, at the time of these interviews, we were all homebound due to COVID-19, and yet all the adults in my study were still actively participating in their communities to some capacity. This older Latinx participant had been homebound for many years prior to our interview, and they felt that due to this, they were no longer participating. He said, I no longer participate in the community because of an amputation on my foot. I used to bring clothes, shoes, donate to institutions. Now I say, whoever wants something has to come to my house to look for it. I've gotten jobs for other people through word of mouth, as they say. That's why they call me. Hey, look, if there's anyone. 2 months ago, it happened. I was lying here when they called. I helped him out all the same, through contacts. I think we would all agree that being a point of contact for community members looking for a job or other resources is an important contribution. Similarly, an African American participant explained that her role in the community was as someone who could give advice. Their experience can help us imagine the ways that AFCIs and other community initiatives would benefit from supporting the participation of homebound older adults from ethnically diverse groups. So my main takeaways. There is a need to engage older adults from Black, Latinx, and other ethno-racially marginalized communities as champions and administrators of current and emerging AFCIs. Not just one person, but a majority, where they feel that their voice can be heard and their decisions valued. This entails creating processes for changing leadership. For example, how long can any one person stay in a leadership position in the AFCI? What processes can be created to ensure that new people have a chance to lead and carry out their ideas? Furthermore, this also involves putting in place a system of accountability because issues of tokenism, microaggression, ableism, and other discriminatory issues are likely to arise. The best approach is to acknowledge it and be prepared to work through it. And finally, it is clear that despite individual level barriers such as being disabled, non-English speaking, and living in poverty, older Black and Latinx adults are participating in their communities in a myriad of ways, and even from home. How can AFCI support these efforts rather than replicate them? Identifying the work that is already being carried out by Latinx and Black older adults is essential to create relationships of reciprocity and solidarity among the AFCI and the broader community. Thank you for your time. Stop share.
Thank you very much, Loudon. We really appreciate your insights and very, very poignant findings. Very much appreciated. And I think there's something that everybody here can learn from your presentation. So for our Q&A session, Emily, could you get the spotlight on both presenters and then also myself too, if you don't mind? And we have, I had just put in the chat, we have two options for our Q&A today. So you can do our typical, you can raise your hand if you use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you'd like to ask a question yourself. We also have, that I just put in the chat, I'll put it in again too, a Slido link that gives you the opportunity to post a question that others can see and vote on. So you can post with your name or you can post anonymously, whichever way you feel more comfortable. If you already see the question on there that you had wanted to ask, or if you see a question on there that sounds really exciting to you, please vote for it. You can like the question, and that way the questions with more likes will know to prioritize those too. So while folks are thinking about your questions that you want to ask and looking in the Slido too, I'm going to go ahead and get started with one question that we had, that our coordinating group had, and it's for either of you who want to answer. So our question is, especially Loudon, you kind of finished off with those ideas of, something that really stuck out to me was that not to invite one person of color to be on your board of directors or something like that, because it may feel tokenizing. People may feel, for various different reasons. So, thinking about, we talk a lot about with our groups, building partnerships and building relationships. So what would be some good best practices for building trust and building relationships with key community leaders from different cultural groups in a way that's more strengthening?
Well, I think my presentation was really focused on the need to engage Black and Latinx as leaders in AFCI. So I think that's really key to making any kind of change in how AFCIs are perceived, the directions that they have, who they benefit. So it's really not just partnering with leaders in the community, which I think is important and also something I bring in. But first and foremost, you have to have them as leaders of the AFCIs that are currently emerging in New Jersey and that are active.
Thank you very much. Mel, do you have any comments on that?
Not for organizations, but I guess for involving, older Latinx folks or, other, marginalized populations. I think it really gets down to like coming to learn how that group in your city or community, what are their needs specifically? So for example, just as an example, a lot of the older Latinx folks in this particular community, they didn't like targeted events that were just for aging people. They actually preferred more intimate gatherings that would have like coffee and some pastries. And they even expressed wanting that to be like a routine thing where they can just go and have coffee and pastries with other older Latinx folks that could stop by and they could just chat. For them, that felt, I don't know if it's low pressured would be the word, but it just felt more organic than saying like, oh, we're hosting an event for like 150 older people in the community and come. And so I think that it's really important to kind of get at that lower level and, not just the community, but on the ground with the folks and just kind of see like, what is it that will help them want to attend these events? One of them said, I would attend if it wasn't Dunkin' Donuts coffee, just little things like that. But if it was actually like coffee from Latin America, that would really get me here every week. So, I mean, that's obviously not something, I don't know, it's not that serious, but I think that just having those kind of dialogues is really important. And also just another example, I had done some work at a day center, and I think it's really important to be culturally sensitive. And so one of the activities that, and so the day center was located where a majority of the Mexican population were like day laborers or had done a lot of work in the farmlands, right? And one of the activities was to do planting of potatoes and tomatoes and things like that at the day center. And that really frustrated a lot of the older folks because it was done without their kind of participation. And they didn't want to toil with gardening when they had done that all their lives. They didn't see that as therapeutic. So I think that another example of, really having these very local, very on the ground conversations with what your diverse members of your communities need.
if I could just add, and I would go ahead and say that, yes, like having the conversations with people in the community, but also everything that Mel is telling you, if you had an older adult from these communities in your leadership group, they could probably tell you these things too. So again, leadership matters.
Yes, thank you very much for both of your thoughtful reflections on that. So I'm going to ask a question from the Slido now, an anonymous question. I think this is for Mel, what has led the public officials in Union City, I believe, to invest public resources in services, programs, staff, and events for older adults?
So it's not Union, because Union is more of a suburb. This is Union City. So I just want to make that distinction.
Okay.
It often happens, so no worries on that. But I would say that it's a very unique place in that the politicians are, the mayor has been in power for very, very long. And the seniors are a very loyal voting bloc, right? And I think that really helps the fact that they are extremely valuable for the politicians. And so as a result, they're catered to. And that's kind of one of the reasons why. There's also a lot of kind of, you can ask the senior why that is, like, why is this an age-friendly place? Why does the mayor care about these things? And you'll hear a lot of discussion about how the mayor's own mother, was a senior and resided in a senior housing. So he's really dedicated to those issues because he himself has, kind of thought about aging with his own mother. So I think that there's actually a lot of like personal reasons why. So what I will say is that I think the uniqueness of it, is important in that it's almost like an incubator of what could potentially come out, be extracted to make other communities just as age friendly. And so I think that it's important that we study those kinds of, those spaces, even though they are quite unique.
Thank you. I think there's a quick follow-up question in the chat. Does Union City have an official age-friendly community initiative established?
I actually don't think it does. I think it's kind of under the radar, like what they implement. I don't know if I don't think so. I want to say very strongly, I don't. I don't even know if they'd consider themselves age friendly, to be honest. It's a very small kind of operation, that office. Again, it's run by kind of one woman, 6 drivers, and then a lot of college students, meaning like 5 in rotation. So it's a small kind of practice that does a lot, for the community.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes me wonder how many other communities have this really great work going on that isn't getting, whether they want recognition for it or not, makes you wonder how much else is going on there too. I think David from Bergen County, you have your hand raised.
I had it and I just lowered it because my question was going to be kind of related to what you just mentioned. Was Union City a designated age-friendly community? And if the environment, Mel, you were describing, this favorable environment for older adults to age in place was a direct result of age-friendly initiative in Union City. But I guess they just answered my question. So I guess it's age-friendly town without the label, I guess, or official designation. It's just the official, the city leadership initiatives that made all these initiatives and different activities for older adults.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's similar things happening in other cities, but it's very quite different on how each kind of like politician in power or like city advocates for seniors and the kind of programs they have. So I think, in the opinion of the participants, like Union City is kind of like better than the other ones. I don't want to make a comparison that way, but that's what they're imagining. And this is why, right? Like we have transportation, which other places do, but not, all the way to Ridgefield from Union City, right? Like for a medical appointment. So that's kind of the example. But yeah, thank you, David.
Thank you. So I have a question and a comment from the Slido that are kind of related. one question, one of the comments is, I'm concerned that, and I think this is back to Laurent's point about being on the board. I'm concerned that anyone would feel that they could not be on a board because they would be the only one voting to support a minority organization. And that could probably put somebody in an uncomfortable situation. And then kind of, I think this was related, what ways do you suggest to approach and find folks to be leaders that is thoughtful, kind, and appropriate?
I think that's a great question. And I mean, it has to do a lot with involving yourself with the community, to the point of going to the places where older Black and Latinos are, where they are involved, asking questions, trying to figure out like, okay, you know, what are the points of connection? Who do people go to? So I think really getting to know the community, to get to know who the leaders are, is important. And then inviting them to participate in the AFCI, again, as champions and leaders, and maybe even supporting, like if you know someone that's already doing something, if you find out that there's someone that's created a group and they're mobilized in some way, how can the AFCI support that effort and say, okay, maybe we actually don't need to take this on, but we can support what this group is doing. So I think that way might be the best way.
Yeah, thank you. Like, find who the leaders already are. Find who the natural, professional, organic, whatever grassroots leaders in any way. Just get to know who they already are, because they're probably there. Thank you. Mel, did you have a comment on that?
No, I don't. I'm not in the organizational aspects.
Okay, no problem. I don't see any hands up. Emily, is there any from the chat or from the Slido that you wanted to bring to our attention?
There's some questions that got kind of multiple votes for asking, so I'll ask one of those too. So one of the questions concerns the intergenerational volunteer program in Union City. If Mel could speak a little bit more about the involvement of, I think, the college students in the office and how that's structured and how that developed.
Yeah, it's actually very naturally occurring too. It's not a program. It just so happens that these are young college students that all needed a job and happened to have gone to City Hall and gotten a job in the senior office. And so they all happen to be like college students. I think one was studying psychology, social work. So it's really very applicable, just kind of naturally happened that way. And I think that there is opportunity there to kind of make it more of a program, and, you know, provide credits, you know, and yeah, so it's not at all like that. I think there are a lot of benefits to not at all like an official program, but I think there's a lot of benefits to an intergenerational program. You know, just to have, I guess for me, what's been interesting is seeing the conversation between the college students and the older folks in the community, and how they care for the older folks, right, as their own, thinking about their own grandparents. And then I think it also helps shepherd an emerging generation to really think about the needs of older people too, that maybe they hadn't thought about beyond just, you know, spending time with their grandparents. So I think there's a lot there that has a lot of potential. Yeah, maybe it would be great to pick that up if I ended up in New Jersey. But
we've got some really great intergenerational programs from some of our communities here that people have shared in the past with us. So great. it would be really great to kind of, you know, maybe that's a future presentation topic, or even a conference presentation topic. We could talk about the different types of intergenerational programming going on in age-friendly initiatives and how they reach different segments of the population and bring them together. Emily, did you want to go with another question in the Slido?
Sure. We had some questions around assessment tools that perhaps you used through your research or that you've seen used in the community of sharing pragmatic resources to conduct inclusive assessments with older adults from diverse and especially historically marginalized backgrounds in the context of age-friendly progress?
I guess I'll just say that my research is more sociologically leaning. So, and I did like a life course research. So, I'd have to have revised my tools to take that more practical approach. So I can't really answer that question in terms of what's available for like measuring, on the ground implementation of age-friendly communities. But I'm, sure there's other folks that can answer that question here.
Yeah, I would agree with Mel. My work is also life course perspective. And again, what we do is get to know the community, right? We ask questions, we listen to their life stories, we learn what they're doing. So I think that's a good way to assess, what is happening in a community. And then actually, this kind of ties up with like the point made earlier about how is it that we get to know who are the leaders. I would say like another way is through the servicing assessments that you already do, including questions about asking them, what projects they're doing in the community, how they're contributing to the community, and leaving it pretty open-ended to see what people say. So that's an idea also to think about what else, like making those assessments be able to also capture who is involved in what they're doing. And also making them in multiple languages. I think that's really important. If you want to bring in Latinx adults, it's important that you have Spanish assessments.
Mm-hmm.
I've received some possibilities for future university community partnerships because it seems like there's a lot of interest too. If either of you are want to jump on that opportunity as well. So thank you. And I think you highlight the value of this qualitative, in-depth research too. I know we want to be able to quantify things. That's how so many things work, especially our funding structures and things like that too. And it's really important to really have this in-depth, detailed understanding of meaning to individual communities and community members too, and not just have the numbers and check boxes. Thank you. Jackie, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I don't have a question. I hope you'll allow me this comment. I think these presentations are fantastic and just chock so full of information that we should realize. I mean, we should know this without you having to tell us, but I think having you tell us in this way has really been very helpful. I'd like to just say a word about Union City. When I was growing up, my father worked there 70 years ago and longer than that. And my husband's law firm, which is now in Bergen County, was founded in Union City. So he worked there when we were first married. It was founded about 125 years ago in Union City. So I knew the community over the years, and it became the densest community in the country after the immigration during the Cuban boat people. And I just find it amazing that people want to stay there despite the poverty, the density, the noise. But it's a phenomenon that makes me think of politics in a more positive light. I say this as a former elected official. In a positive light, and that we really have to be working with all these decision makers, because as Mel said, seniors are loyal voters. The politicians in Hudson County, we laugh about them, but it's all about politics. So it's all about serving the people, and then the people are loyal. So it's not that they're just saying, you have to vote for me. They're giving everybody reason to vote for them, to love the community, to have the services that they need. We often find that we're fighting with our municipal leadership, or at least at the most, they're sort of disinterested, and that they may give lip service, but they're really not as on board as we'd like them to be. So somehow we have to show them what a difference they can make and what a difference it makes to them when the senior population is getting what they need and will be supportive of the leadership. So, I don't like to be political, but I think it just shows. I found it fascinating to find out that people want to age in place in Union City the way they want to age in place in Teaneck or West Orange or any place else. If they're happy, their connections are there, they feel happy culturally. But I think a big part of it is what their leadership is recognizing and doing for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely the politics. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think recognizing that, if I can chime in, recognizing that the thing that would make you want to stay in an area isn't necessarily the thing that would make someone else want to stay in an area, or the deal breaker that would make you want to leave or them want to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, in this particular community, there's a very age-friendly is a very urban space because for many different reasons, for many different reasons, some that maybe are not as apparent. For example, like a lot of them migrated from, rural places. So part of that, part of the success of their American dream is being able to live in the city or in an urban environment, and that kind of plays a role even in their experiences as older adults. So yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. Why these particular people are drawn to one of the most densely populated cities in the country. There's also a lot of them also talk about friends that have gone to Florida or other rural places, and the fact that they need cars there, which is not so with the density comes accessibility to just doing everyday things, right? So I think there's it depends on the person and on the community, and yeah, leadership is critically important in this regard. Like politics plays a large part in the success of their age friendliness.
I was going to say that in many of Latin American countries where people would live, they also are able to walk around and get things done. Like the idea of owning a car is not necessarily like what they're used to, or they don't know how to drive. So being able to get around in public transportation and walk is essential for their livelihood to just live.
Thank you. I have some more questions for both of you from surrounding the leadership structures. So, and I apologize that I've been less formal than I should be, and I want to acknowledge both of your important degrees and titles. So Dr. Reyes and Dr. Plasencia, from your research, have you found that there's a merit to an approach where community leaders might be sensitized parallelly so that the burden of increasing participation isn't put on minoritized people alone? And kind of a similar tag-along question to that being, what are some of the structural considerations beyond interpersonal interactions for supporting older adults who are from historically marginalized groups as leaders? So that was a lot. I can put those in the chat if you would like to be able to see those too.
I think so. The first question was, how do we not put all the burden on outreach among minority older adults?
Yeah, I put that in the chat. And then the other one there too, if you're able to see the chat. So one is about, I think, I keep going back to that board of directors. For some reason, that just really stuck with me so much, so that maybe all people in that board might be trained. And I don't know if the person who asked the question wants to clarify in the Slido, because it was an anonymous question too. You're welcome to do that.
So I would say that, yes, if you have a leadership board that's all white, the first thing that you have to do is diversify it. Like, it's not just about putting the burden, but it's actually creating representation so that people see that you care and you make space for leaders from other communities. So I think that's priority. And then, of course, you have to have leaders that are willing to get to know community members from other groups and take the time to be in those spaces, learn about them, right? What you call sensitizing. So it's just, creating relationships with people from other groups and communities that are different from your own. But I don't think that should replace the need to include leadership representation from other marginalized groups. It's not burdensome, it's necessary to show that there's representation and that you have a diversity of skills, languages, and people from different ability levels. Like, why can't someone from their home be a leader from the AFCI? Like, if they can have access to a computer, if they can make meetings, if they can do outreach from their home, there's no reason that you can't have a homebound older adult be an AFCI leader. So I think finding those ways to really create diversity in who's leading these initiatives is priority.
Thank you very much. And I think, there are some of our groups that are, having transitions in their leadership too. I mean, transitions can happen at any time in leadership for age-friendly initiatives. And, as we think about who to bring on, or if we already have a leadership team and you're looking to maybe expand it now, just to think about being intentional about that, it's always a good time. I think there's one more question in the Slido. Emily, is there anything else in the chat or your own thoughts that you wanted to bring in or ask a question? I don't see anybody's hands raised.
I just wanted to ask the second part of that last question about the structural considerations and, in our work, what we've learned through studying the Alliance over time is really the emergent structures that come about as part of age-friendly community change that hasn't been as emphasized in like the literature or on the checklists of so there's some sense you need an advisory committee, but not like much discussion of structure beyond that. And I just wonder if how that connects with resourcing these initiatives to begin with and the hazard of, when they're not resourced systematically, how it can actually exacerbate inequities or compound issues of inclusivity. If there's thoughts from your work that can reflect on those themes.
Yeah, so I was thinking about basically, of course, it's important to provide funding and resources and have these initiatives have the necessary money and materials that is needed to carry out the work. I think that's crucial for any kind of community initiative. But I do encourage people to think about those interpersonal interactions, because if you from my work, I'm actually finding that it's not money and it's not lack of time or access to transportation or something that's necessarily what's limiting. I mean, it's not limiting, people are still doing it. And of course can be sometimes burdensome and stressful, but it's happening. So I think it's really important. What people said is those interpersonal interactions, what people were talking about was just well, I'm not going to go into a board where I'm going to risk being tokenized, or people are going to say derogatory comments to me. So these interpersonal interactions are crucial. And I don't think that we pay enough attention to how we create structures of accountability to, discuss these issues when they come up, so that people feel that, okay, if this happens, I know there's a way for us to discuss it and it doesn't have to stay there. I don't have to leave the board. That's actually crucial for being able to work in a diverse group and community. You need to be able to hold people accountable and have discussions around them. So yes, I think both, we need resources and funding, but we definitely need to pay attention to those interpersonal interactions. And I don't think we do that enough.
Thanks.
And if somebody says there's a problem or a conflict, to believe them and listen to them and resolve it together. The conflict is not always it can be good. It can be really important for strengthening collaborations. It's not to not have conflict. It's to resolve it in a way that further strengthens the group and empowers everybody, especially the people who were hurt. Thank you very much. Well, I think that's our time for our discussion today. I am so grateful for both of you coming to speak today. I feel like you're going to become such, renowned scholars in the years ahead that we're all going to be able to say we knew you when, and we were able to have this really wonderful in-depth conversations where we were able to learn so much from your research and from your insights. And I just really, on behalf of everybody present, want to thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you.